And today, Cara Valentino and myself are going to be sharing our experiences of releasing a false belief system. There's 7 steps that I've taken this past couple of weeks. The first is awareness. In order to heal and to release, I first had to realize what I was doing without beating myself up about it. I became the witness to my internal dialogue of judging and my feelings and hurt feelings. And I had to make it okay to say it publicly. Second, once again, I had to acknowledge my grief. Third, I remind myself to honor their parenting, even when I disagree with their views. Fourth is judging the judging. No matter how spiritual or open-minded or compassionate we are, on some level, judgment remains a part of our lives. Discernment protects us from harm and guides our actions in positive ways. It's the identification with the judgment that separates us from our divine nature. It's the emotional trigger associated with the judgment that creates the suffering. By acknowledging my judgment is a part of my pain and sadness, I can now dialogue with it. Oh, there you are again. That is not who I am. You're just a visitor. And I can now ask you to leave. Fifth is acceptance. I acknowledge that my brothers and I are in very different paths. My brothers and I came into this world for different reasons and for different purposes. So who am I to say what their journey should look like? Most religions and political systems think that they have the market on right thinking. Even in unity, we sometimes think that we know better. But there are many paths and many spokes on the wheel, all moving us toward awakening. We are actually more alike than we are different. So I have to make that okay if I'm to walk my talk. Sixth is humor and playfulness. I laugh at myself sometimes for the seriousness of it all. When I lighten up and just allow what is, I do feel better. The flow of life increases. I'm able to detach from the emotional triggers. I'm more in the present moment, and I observe from a new perspective. Lastly is love. When we cultivate a feeling of love and compassion, judgment cannot coexist. So how do I stay in this place of release and healing? Affirmations are a statement of truth, and they are useful to rewire our thoughts and to help us stay in the present moment. But a vow is a promise, something to strive for continually. It's a spiritual stretch reminding us of where we are going. So a vow requires planning, preparation, going into that spiritual place, feeling the divine, feeling our vow deep within us, then declaring it. So I vow to vibrate unconditionally and to see the face of God in every living being and in every circumstance. And so I let it be.
I myself am no stranger to suffering after spending a lifetime on a sprint trying to get away from it. Even though there is loads of anesthesia out there available, they only anesthetize the fear of suffering, not the suffering itself. And when my mom passed away a few years ago, the run came to an end. There was no place to go. And so there I was, having to build a practice around holding grief and suffering while being present to my life, to being in year 2 in seminary, to being in year 2 as a prayer chaplain team leader, and preparing for the annual retreat that every prayer chaplain goes through. It's a weekend retreat in April. And there's a lot of preparation that goes into preparing that space for the prayer chaplains who are renewing their vows for the upcoming year. And there was no place to run. So I had to find a practice of holding the suffering. But if we don't take that time to hold it, that incessant, relentless pressure is there. And suffering is like that. It is incessant and relentless if we don't stop and give it our attention. And what I have learned through practice, nothing I have read or heard ever prepared me for this. It was only practice. That when I stopped and held my suffering gently and began to speak to it and hear what it had to say, something happens, like divine grace steps in and picks up and holds the piece that's too excruciating, the excruciating piece I was too afraid to feel. And divine grace picks up that piece, allows me to be present. The incessant nature, it's about 30 seconds, maybe a minute, and then it's off. And so I've been able to make friends with my suffering, with your suffering, but make it clear, it's not staying for dinner. Sometimes I find myself using all of my brilliant gifts in the wrong way. And I was using my brilliance and my wit to create sarcasm that was just cutting. And I don't know if I'm the only person in the room that can relate to being sarcastic. If I am, I'm alone, but if you can relate, then you have someone here with you. And what ended up happening was that I noticed that when I was letting my suffering leak, it was hurting people around me too. So my unwillingness to face it was causing suffering. I come across this quote from Viktor Frankl, who is an Austrian concentration camp survivor. And this is his quote. He says, "In between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space lies our freedom to choose. And in our choice lies our freedom and our growth." And when that landed in my body, I realized that I had given away my own freedom by having an instantaneous response that no situation or person can ever require of me. There's never a time I can't just take a breath. So my choice now is I can breathe. I can ask myself, what's hurting? Because underneath the sarcasm and the irritation, there's pain. And without responding instantly in the moment, I can be present to what's really happening. Can breathe and listen for what's hurting and invite the grace of God to be with me there, because it is an irrefutable fact that when we are willing to be present to suffering, grace is right there with us. Divine grace is always right there with us. So the vow that I took is that I vow to breathe into spaciousness. I breathe into divine grace, and I choose growth and freedom and kindness. For this I give thanks. So it is.